Hi and welcome back to our Photography Masterclass Series. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark from World in Focus. Over the past 3 challenges we've explored seeing light, mastering shutter speeds and learning about aperture settings on your camera. But today we're completing that exposure triangle by diving into the last component, ISO.
Exactly. So now ISO is probably one of the most misunderstood settings on your camera. Many people think that turning up the ISO setting makes your camera more sensitive to light, but that's not quite right.
What ISO actually does is amplify the signal that's already been captured by your sensor. Think of it like turning up the volume on a quiet recording.
Exactly. When you turn up the volume, you make everything louder, including any background noise that may already exist in your image or in your audio recording. And that's exactly what happens with ISO. You brighten your image, but you also amplify the digital noise, which is inherent in your image at all ISO settings, and which appears as what we would call grain.
But here's the thing, when you understand how your camera captures and processes light, you can use ISO much more deliberately. And one of the best tools to help you do that is your camera's histogram.
Now, if you've never used the histogram before, it's that little graph you can display on your camera's LCD screen. It shows you a visual distribution of the tones in your image. The left side represents the shadows, the right side represents the highlights, and the middle area covers the midtones in the image.
It's like a map of your exposure. If the graph is bunched up on the left, your image is underexposed or too dark. If it's crammed against the right edge, well then you've blown out your highlights and lost detail.
So in post-processing software such as Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom, you'll see that same histogram at the top right-hand corner of your display. But now you have the power to recover the highlights and lift the shadows, which is where shooting in the RAW file format and understanding ISO really pays off.
And this brings us to a technique called exposing to the right, or ETTR. The idea is to very slightly overexpose your image so the histogram shifts towards the brighter side without clipping those important highlights.
Now we realise that with today's modern camera sensors, it's absolutely possible to underexpose an image and still produce a clean, usable result through post-processing. But it's still good practice to get the cleanest possible image in camera. And here's why this works. Your camera sensor captures much more detail in the brighter areas of an image. Plus, the noise that is inherent in every image at all ISO settings is also more prevalent in the shadow areas. So by exposing slightly brighter, you actually get cleaner, less noisy shadows, which is especially important when you're working at those higher ISOs.
And then in editing, you can bring the exposure back down and you end up with a much cleaner final image than if you'd shot it darker and then tried to brighten it later.
Now just remember, this technique only really works when you're shooting in the RAW file format. And you must watch that histogram carefully to make sure you're not clipping or losing important highlight details. Now the key takeaway really is that ISO isn't just a number you dial in, it's part of a balancing act between brightness, detail and noise. Now master the histogram and a little bit of ETTR and you'll have much more control over your final images.
Okay, so where are we going to explore all of this? Because I'm glad we're shooting inside today. Just look at that rain pelting down.
Yeah, well, we're going to head to the Melbourne Museum, which if you've never been before is absolutely fantastic. It is also perfect for ISO exploration. It's a beautiful space with large bright gallery areas and it's got some wonderfully dark atmospheric sections too, like the dinosaur section. So.
Must do that. Well, those varying light conditions will give us the perfect opportunity to experiment with different ISO settings, including auto ISO.
Yes.
And then we'll see how cameras respond to those challenges.
Yeah, exactly. Now, rather than competing against each other today, we're just going to explore ISO together. I mean, we've been shooting together for years, so we know what's to expect anyway, but we thought we'd do this and then share our discoveries. We'll shoot in various lighting conditions and then discuss what we've learned later or when we get back home.
And we really encourage you to grab your camera and explore ISO for yourself. Photography is all about learning by doing, so follow along and try your own ISO experiments.
All right, let's get going and head into the Melbourne Museum. apparently this is the most complete Triceratops skeleton anywhere in the world. Okay, so yesterday we went to the Melbourne Museum to talk about ISO and to explore ISO on our cameras. But before we get into that, I'm surprised I actually allowed you in the house today wearing this t-shirt. What on earth is going on?
Well, it's actually in your honour. Having I felt come runner-up to you on a last couple of challenges, it felt only right that I should wear a runners-up shirt.
Yes, actually, yeah.
Constant bridesmaids.
Well, as I'm a Spurs fan, I don't think I've got a leg to stand on in that score, do I?
No, so yeah, in your honour, I'm wearing it.
Good, thank you for that. Now, we're looking at your images here. The idea yesterday was to explore different ISOs. It was less of a challenge, more of an exploration, really. We went to the Melbourne Museum. We started in the outdoor rainforest area, which is a fabulous part of the museum, isn't it? Now, you've shot a series of images here, and your intent was to shoot these images at a variety of ISOs and then just process and see what the highest ISO setting you could get a usable image out of.
That's absolutely right. Knowing at a lower ISO, and it wasn't so prevalent outside in the rainforest area, there was a bit of light, but knowing inside that the lower ISOs were possibly going to be compromised with blurry movement.
Exactly.
But my aim was to sort of try and show 3 or 4 images today.
Yep.
Processed at the highest ISO out of each bracket of images that I took.
But, that makes sense. That makes sense. Because obviously the lower your ISO, the slower your shutter speed. The higher ISO, the higher your shutter speed. So perfect for exploring that in the museum.
Yeah, so this was almost a macro type shot, just leaning into the forest floor that they had there. I just liked the different contrasting colours, etc. The lights, the darks, the greens, and felt that any noise would be seen quite easily there in those lighter colours.
Yeah, now this is, all of this was taken on your R6 Mark II.
That's right.
And if we're looking at this is a shot at ISO 20,000.
That's correct.
Now, looking into your shadow areas here, there's a little bit of noise going on that we can see. It's a sharp image, there's no denying that, but there is a little bit of noise in there. ISO 16,000, ISO 10,000, ISO 8,000, 6400, 4,000, 3200, and then we're down to ISO 2000, and then the last image was taken here at ISO 1000.
Yes.
And obviously you can see, we look into the shadows here, there is no noise here as such that is really noticeable, is it? But then we come though to your final image, which is the ISO 20,000 image, which you've processed. We have been looking at the raw files, I hasten to add. We're now looking at Mark's processed image. And apart from the fact that it's a great image, what I notice, and I don't know if you realised this was going to happen when you shot it, but what I've noticed is that where you processed it and you've added the contrast has hidden the noise wonderfully, because this is an ISO 20,000 image.
And I'd also like to point out that when I processed this particular image, I didn't use any noise reduction.
Exactly, so there's no noise reduction applied to this. This is simply just increasing the contrast.
That's right.
Bringing up your highlights, bringing down your shadows so they're darker. It just goes to show, I suppose if someone was after the too long didn't read version of this video, it would be quite simply, don't worry about ISO.
That's right.
Use auto ISO and you'll be fine. But for the purpose of getting back to our video, that just proves it, doesn't it? Here you've 20,000 and you haven't used any ISO noise reduction software. Another great advert too for the R6 Mark II mirrorless 24-105 combination as well. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Coming on to, we then moved inside to the dinosaur exhibit, and your first image here that we see is shot at 25,600 ISO. Yeah. And certainly, if you zoom in, you can see that there is noise going on in the background there. But I mean, even without any noise reduction, that is a perfectly usable image, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not saying you need to, but if you were to convert that to a black and white, that would almost be the equivalent of like what I used to shoot Tri-X film years ago. That's the sort of grain I would expect. Showing your age. Showing my age, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with that, is there? You then come on to, okay, so you've gone to ISO 12,800, ISO 5,000, and your final image was ISO 100 before we get to your processed one. Now this is interesting. Your ISO 100 image
It's quite blurry. It is, yeah.
which is, I mean, it's to be expected. We both knew this was going to happen, but you weren't able to rest on anything, and so your shutter speed here was half a second. So the question becomes, would you rather have a blurry image that you can't use or a slightly grainy image, which you can certainly clean up? And obviously the answer is the higher ISO image. You've added your processing twist on it, which I like this. I love this.
I just wanted a floating head. And again, I've used the ISO 20,000 here, and you'll notice that the noise is pretty much... I did use noise reduction in this.
Yeah, but look at that. It's clean as a whistle.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, that's fabulous. So now in this setting, obviously you were changing the ISO as you went, as I was when I did my experiments too. But it has to be said, really, and I said this before, but it has to be said, auto ISO is the way to go, isn't it? You walk into a darkened room, the camera raises the ISO. You walk outside to a brighter area, the camera lowers the ISO. So it's always giving you the optimum ISO that it thinks for the situation in front of you. Okay, so this next series of images, the planets.
You say with a smile on your face, yes.
Well, I know what's coming. So this is a case dedicated showing the evolution of the Earth from a fireball, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, and these were behind glass. There's certain more challenges in terms of reflections and light bouncing around.
Yeah, so you've shot the first one ISO 100. The next one is ISO 800. The next one is ISO 5000.
Yes.
And the next one is ISO 20,000.
Yes.
And it basically meant at ISO 100 you were using a 13th of a second at f4. You then went down to an 80th of a second and so on. Now when you're shooting at the highest ISO, the 80th of a second at ISO 20,000 meant that you were much more confident you weren't going to get any camera shaking.
That's right, no blur, yeah. And when I looked at that particular image standing as I was side on, I had a vision.
You did, didn't you?
Which is better than having emotion. I had a vision about how it could be processed with extreme imagination.
Boldly going where no one has gone before.
That's right. Thank you, Scotty.
So that works, doesn't it? And the thing is that I love the image, I love what you've done with it, but even if I zoom in here at ISO 20,000, now you've used a little bit of noise reduction.
That's right.
Who can tell? I mean, it's...
and this is the inherent noise reduction in Adobe itself.
This is the
in Camera Raw.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, just to finish up, because I also did the dinosaur ones here, but I just wanted to finish up with these last two of yours. And we've got some other wonderful shots here, but the last two are particularly good. This is from the balcony above the Triceratops.
Yeah.
Here you've shot this one at 25,000 at 600 ISO.
Yep.
I zoom in onto the spine of this.
Quite some noise.
There is some noise showing here, and it has to be said, this is a very dark room, isn't it?
Yes.
This is a very, very dark room.
And the light was fluctuating too.
Yes, as the exhibit evolved, it was, yes, that's right. Fair bit of noise there, but then if I zoom into the same spot on the processed image where you've used enhance, the noise reduction.
Yeah, and that's 25,600 ISO.
You'd have no problem printing that quite large and putting it on your wall, would you?
Yeah.
There is absolutely
so again, just reinforcing, have no fear about shooting at a higher ISO. You can pull that right out in your image.
Yeah. I mean, I found much the same. If we're coming over to my shots here, the first one that as we walked into that rainforest area, as you walk in, you walk underneath the river part of it so that you can see the fish and the things that are living there. And as we walked in, I took the first shot here at ISO 25,600 on the R5 Mark II. And if I zoom in, this is handheld standing up. You zoom in, you can see there is a fair bit of grain here, but you can still, the notices are still legible.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. You will notice there's a lack in contrast by comparison to the unprocessed image where I sat down on a bench and I rested the camera and shot at ISO 100. When I was hand holding at ISO 25,600, my shutter speed was an 80th of a second. This one ended up being 3.2 seconds. So I've got a very clean image, which is lovely. Yeah. And I was able to rest on something to do so. But notice that anything moving, such as the fish in my image, of course, and the child that walked through with his father, they blurred. So that's one reason why it can be useful to use a lower ISO rather than always using a higher ISO if you want to create that motion blur effect and blur people out of your image there. So the next shot is of this bird that was wandering around the forest floor. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there was a note.
Siberian pheasant.
Siberian pheasant.
But let us know in the comments below if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Dodo, oh, I don't know, aardvark. No, when we were walking around though, it was a very dark area, wasn't it? And I was using the 7200 2.8 on this. To capture this bird, I was shooting at around about a 2/50th of a second, but it was a very dark area. And my ISO has gone up to 40,000 ISO on the R5 Mark II. So I used the enhance feature in Adobe Camera Raw, which you'll see, here's the raw file, and now you see the enhanced version, and you can see that obviously it's taken out a reasonable amount of the noise.
Yeah.
So then I brought the image into Photoshop. I made a duplicate of the layer. I then applied Topaz denoise to the topmost layer.
Yeah.
Which, as you can see from this image here, is a little bit strong. I mean, it's certainly cleared the grain that was still left over after Adobe Enhance, but it's added some quite strong denoise and sharpening artifacts to it. It's almost a bit of a blur in these feathers here.
Yeah.
So what I then did was, before I saved my final image, I lowered my layer's opacity to 50%, so I halved the effect effectively. And that way I've got, from an ISO 40,000 image, I think a perfectly printable image of the bird.
It's excellent. You could have done with a few planets in the background.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Put an Arsenal t-shirt in there somewhere for him to do his business on.
Oh, ouch.
Coming back to the raw files though, what I then did was, when we went into the dinosaur exhibit, I noticed there was the dinosaur velociraptor, I'm assuming, something like that. I've shot this one at a high ISO of 8,000. Again, there's nothing wrong with this in terms of printing, and with a little bit of enhance, you can see you can really get rid of any noise. I did notice there was a sign saying please don't bring any food or drink into the exhibit, so I rested the camera on that and I was able to shoot ISO 100. And primarily the difference between 8,000 and 100 is obviously my shutter speed changes. ISO 100, my shutter speed was down to 1.3 seconds, so again I've got that lovely blur effect where I've gotten rid of people effectively, which is quite nice. But I suppose the takeaway here is there's nothing wrong with either image. You know, if you have to shoot at ISO 8000, so be it. You're still going to get a very usable, very printable image, aren't you? Particularly if you clean it up.
Yeah, I think a lot comes down to what kind of effect you want with the people in the image. So
yeah, exactly. I think that's really what it comes down to. And at the end, I just wanted to finish up with going through. We went into the bug exhibit, and I wanted to go through a series of images I shot, starting at ISO 100 right down to ISO 51,200, using the R5 Mark II, and just take you through these. I mean, if you're looking at this, I'll zoom into this corner. ISO 100, 200, 400. ISO 800 now, ISO 1600, ISO 3200. Again, looking at these on screen, you can see a little bit of noise creeping in here, but it's only a little bit. When we get to ISO 6400, we do see a little increase in the noise. This is probably when I would start thinking about adding noise reduction, and I would use the Adobe Enhance.
6400.
At 6400. So when I come down to the 12,800 image, again, more noise. 25,600, more noise, but as we've seen, still usable. The final image is at 51,200. Is this usable? This comes down to a matter of opinion, I think. I have shot this one at a very high ISO and then used Enhance to remove some of the noise. And you'll see that it does a reasonable job. It's still usable, I feel. It's still printable. Would I prefer a lower ISO? Yes, of course. If you look at the two, though, the other main difference is that the denoising software is blurring your image slightly, and you will notice a lack in contrast by comparison to a lower ISO image. Having said that, I think it's still usable.
Again, also, if you're looking for perhaps a black and white outcome and you wanted that film effect with some heavy grain for a period look, then that's perfectly right in the sweet spot.
Yeah. I don't mind. There are two schools of thought, really, aren't there, with regards to noise in images. Some people say live with it. It's just part of the photo. And some people say, no, I hate it, I have to get rid of it. I'm of the belief that it works in some images. I don't mind it in particularly if I'm doing street type photography. I don't mind a bit of grain. Nighttime, I don't mind a bit of grain. If I'm doing a job for a client, of course, I will produce full clean images. But for myself personally, I don't mind a little bit of grain in the image. Did you learn anything particularly new from this, or was it just...
Don't be afraid of shooting at high ISO. Don't be afraid of using the higher ISO images out of the whole bracket that you take.
So I don't think there are any surprises there in what we found while playing with ISO, but it did complete the exposure triangle, didn't it?
Sure.
We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, if you'd like to try this challenge for yourself, we have our Facebook page, Mark.
We do, World in Focus.
Yeah, and we'd love to see your images, and we'd also like to hear your thoughts on high and low ISO images. Does it bother you that your images have a lot of grain in them? You're happy to print them? Let us know what your thoughts and comments are in the comments down below.
And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Indeed we do.
Thank you.
See you.